This is Joe Crispin, former Penn State and professional basketball player. You are listening to the Mark Lesko podcast.
I think you said that he could have gotten more separation.
There were some technique fundamentals in the receiver that weren't perfect in the 80s. I had to throw in a few points of criticism.
You hate to see a game that was where there was that many points scored and was that exciting and that many swings in momentum, etc., effectively get ended by ref.
What was it like playing in March Madness? I mean, we have it going on right now.
But playing it was amazing. I mean, like, that's kind of your whole goal is to just be a part of that. It's such a special thing where the whole country is tuning in and anything is really possible, you know.
When you first started playing football, you know, did you always want to play in college?
No, I was growing up. I was a big baseball guy. Loved baseball. And then 8th grade, I remember I got a call from my uncle, Coach Nagel. He's like, hey, I got the job. And I was just like, all right, I'll play football for you.
Like the video if you like the video. Ring the notification bells. Have a phenomenal weekend. As always, we'll catch you in the next one.
Hey, everybody, this is Greg Garrity.
So Anthony Lottie will punt it away from the 41. Greg Garrity is the deep man for Penn State at the 10-yard line.
Former Penn State receiver and 2016 Big Ten champion. You're listening to the best Penn State Nittany Lion podcast, the Mark Lesko podcast.
All right, everybody, welcome back into another episode of the Mark Lesko podcast. And Rob, just so you know, we're not live. I'll be cutting this up and putting it up. I'll be putting clips up and everything too. So joined by Rob Oshinskie, owner of Victory Sports, lead trainer at Victory Sports, someone I've known for a while now. Rob, I started using your gym, it was a few years ago. I think I first came in when I was working for Tyler Smith under Krauso.
Yeah, it was before COVID, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think it was like 2017, 2018 when I was in there. Yeah. So
yeah, there's been like a time warp, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, time has flown by for sure. And a lot of stuff has happened since then. But yeah, Rob, I always like going to your gym. One reason why I wanted to have you on here is to get your story and your background. And, you know, you have your wall of fame and everything. You have this great gym there in State College. It's one of the best in State College, especially for athletes. So, and I was going to say this before we got on, but I wanted to get it recorded. You know, every time I talk to you about fitness, I can't believe how much you know about fitness and nutrition and everything. Being a trainer, I was a trainer myself. And, you know, like they said about Joe Paterno, Joe's forgotten more about football than most of us have ever learned. And I think that's the way with you with fitness. You've probably forgotten more than most have ever even learned. You're so knowledgeable of every aspect of it. So thanks for coming on, Rob. I appreciate it.
Thanks for the kind words, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Rob, what got you into fitness? What got you into training? And I know you played football and everything, but what got you into this field?
I think I really have to give credit to my dad and my brother. My brother was about 9 years older than me, and I was this overweight kid. I was always tall, but I was overweight. And my dad and my brother started getting me exercising around the house. And you know, they really didn't necessarily know what they were doing, but they planted the seed, they laid a foundation. And my brother started taking me to his gym when I was young. I was 12, 13 years old. And I just loved the atmosphere. I loved challenging myself. And really, if I could pinpoint one other key point in the journey for me, when I was in the 7th grade, my dad took me to my first Penn State game. It was kind of a famous Penn State-Nebraska game where Todd Blackledge threw a last-second touchdown to win the game. And I grew up in the Pennsylvania coal region, and football and wrestling were king. But I was a baseball player, and it was literally that game that kind of galvanized my love for football. And I can remember walking out of Beaver Stadium, looking at my dad going, yeah, I'm going to play here someday. And
yeah,
making that promise to him was essentially the promise to myself that I'm going to work my tail off. So that was really the foundation.
Yeah, Rob, that's interesting because being from here, you love Penn State football. If you're not a Penn State football fan, then you either hate Penn State football or you love Penn State football. Most people love it because that's all you hear about here. So that's interesting that that's what got you started. Now you did you played high school football. And then what did you do after that?
So make what could be a long story relatively short. I had a pretty solid junior season. Started hearing from a lot of people, Penn State, Notre Dame, NC State, Georgia Tech, all the academies. And aside from the academies, it was really all predicated on if you grow, and I didn't. So again, there's a lot of in-betweens, but I ended up going to prep school for a year because by the time we realized the big school scholarships weren't going to happen, I was a preferred walk-on at Penn State and a number of other places, but everybody was out of money. So I did a postgraduate year of prep school at Milford Academy in Connecticut, and then ended up at Bucknell.
And I remember you talking about that when you were at Bucknell, you had an injury. It was squatting, right? Is that how that happened?
Yeah, I don't want to put a black eye on squats, but I herniated a disc in my back doing a submaximal squat test my freshman year at Bucknell, and it really had a huge impact on not only my college career, but on the rest of my life. I've had back issues on and off ever since.
Yeah, I've had that same thing, not that serious, but sometimes I'm doing squats and feel a pinch in my back, and it hurts. I mean, that kind of stuff can happen, especially as you get older. I'm 31 now, and I can't really do what I did when I was like 20, 21, unfortunately. But yeah, it can happen so easily. But it sounds like, Rob, that when that happened, did that inspire you to get into training people more? Because it kind of ended your football career in a way.
Well, I played after that, but I was just never really myself after the injury. So yes and no. I was a pre-med as an undergrad. I was pretty heck bent on becoming an orthopedic surgeon. But as you know, I grew up in a small town, blue collar family, and I knew nothing about business. And my dream was to have an orthopedic center in which we had a training facility attached to it. And I decided after school that I was going to take a year or two off and go out and work and get some real world experience, which I did. But during that time, that was when I really fell in love with training. I started going to conferences and meeting people, and I didn't realize how much research and knowledge was out there. And as I started going to conferences, it was a big eye opener for me, and decided that med school wasn't really the path I wanted to follow.
Yeah. Yeah. And, like I said, I've been in your gym for a few years. I heard of your gym before I was even in there. But that a lot of athletes had gone in there. Were you trying to get into this to specifically help athletes improve? And were you trying to work with a specific kind of athlete, like potential D1 athlete or just D1 athletes, or you've coached everyone. You've coached professional athletes all the way down. So were you trying to help any particular group when you got into it?
Yeah. So my big passion was athletes, and I thought the higher, the better. I'll tell you what happened in between. Early on in my career, I was mostly training adults because those were the people I had access to, and those are the people that were paying the bills. And I realized that, there's something called the adult athlete, which you are. And there's a lot of satisfaction in helping an adult to either reattain a level of fitness that they didn't think they could get back to, or even attain a level of fitness they never thought was possible. There's also a tremendous amount of satisfaction in working with a kid that's in 8th grade and really has passion and desire to be great and is willing to do whatever it takes, and you see it through. Like what some people are surprised with is I'm still coaching. Like I literally just got done with a coaching session with a kid who's probably going to end up being a Division III college football player, and another guy who currently is a Division II college football player. But the guy that's going to be the D3 player, and I say this in front of him, 3 years ago, if you'd have been standing there with his coaches and said, hey, this kid's going to be a college football player, and let's start this, he's going to be a starter at pretty big high school. His coaches would have been like, yeah, probably not. But this kid's been all in. He's changed his diet. He's on top of his sleep, and he trains like crazy. And he has transformed himself. And there's a ton of satisfaction in walking a kid through that journey. I would tell you, for me, more satisfaction than there is taking a guy who's a Division I player and trying to get him to the pros sometimes. We had a guy this fall or this spring that worked with us from Lock Haven, who was just a great young guy, Chris Collier, who's with the Ravens right now. Chris was awesome. Loved working with him, but love the high school guys.
Yeah, I agree with you. I coached 1 year. It was just junior high track and field. Something I'm going to get into more as my life goes on. But watching these guys go from young kids to college athletes or whatever it is, it's very cool to watch. And you see that a lot because you work with a ton of different people. So, Rob, can you dive into, I guess, your philosophy with athletes? I mean, I'm sure you have the same philosophy, I'm sure, but you have a different approach to each person. So is there anything in particular about your approach that you would want to talk about?
I think if there was one thing that you could kind of say sets me apart, but it's not like as if other guys aren't doing it. It's just something that I embraced literally 20 years ago, and that is single leg training. I believe in bilateral squatting. I mean, don't get me wrong. We squat, we front squat, we back squat. But if you look at a 12-month training period for the majority of our athletes, most of our training volume is done single leg. And I could tell you story after story of guys that saw results unlike they've ever seen before. I'll share one quick one. We had a guy who was a four-time All-American at Bucknell, was preparing for a pro day with us. His best squat performance ever, and this was a 6'3", 267-pound guy, was 435 for 5. Some of your listeners may go, wow, 435 for 5. Well, when you're that big and you're 23, 24 years old, that's really not an exciting number. We did single leg work exclusively for 8 weeks, followed by 2 weeks back to bilateral work, because of course in a pro day, you're jumping off 2 legs. So you've got to reinforce those patterns to some degree. But 10 weeks later, he squatted 500 for 5.
Wow.
Yeah. So his back squat went up more in 10 weeks than it did in the previous 2 years. So single leg is a big part philosophically of what we do. I would think probably the other principle that's kind of an overriding principle for our training system is that we have tools in the toolbox. We're not disciples of any one training methodology or modality. So we're not a kettlebell gym. We're not a powerlifter gym. We're not a bodybuilder gym. We are familiar with a host of different methods, and we utilize different methods as is going to be most helpful to the athlete or to the team.
Yeah, Rob, that's very interesting because I have seen that. I have seen you doing that with athletes in the gym. So is there that's a good example of someone who saw great results from that. So typically when you get athletes, are they young, or because it seems like there's a lot of Penn State guys that come in there, a lot of college guys. So is there a particular time frame in which you like to start with an athlete, or do you just kind of, when they want to work with you, you work with them?
So kind of two parts to that question. One, we do see some Penn State guys when they enter the portal, but Penn State's obviously made some really phenomenal investments in their program. They have some great strength coaches. So we don't see any of their athletes that are actively in their program. But to answer the second part of your question, and this would be a message that to anybody who's a parent or intends to be a parent at some point, the younger the better. I mean, to within reason. We don't have 3-year-olds in here, but first of all, I want to dispel one myth for any of you who think that you can stunt a 12-year-old's growth by lifting weights. There is zero science to support that. And I have a standing offer to anyone. If you can produce one solid study that validates that myth, I will take you to dinner. And I've been offering this to people for about 15 years, and I haven't spent a penny. So if it's my kid, we're strength training at 4 or 5 years old. Now let's qualify what I mean by that. We have to understand that for a 4-year-old, walking up steps can be strength training, and in most cases it is. For a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, standing on one leg is strength training. Standing with a medicine ball and slamming it back and forth with dad and son, that's strength training. So we don't bring 8-year-olds in here and put 200 pounds on their back or have them pull 200 pounds off the floor. Strength training looks like a lot of different things, but here's the thing. If you're the coach of a youth athlete or you're a parent, the simple question becomes, what do you want? How do you want your kid to adapt? What do you want to get better? Well, you want them to get faster. You want them to get more coordinated. You want them to jump higher. You want them to be more explosive. All those things are the byproducts of a good strength training program.
Yes, absolutely. So I saw Noah Kane in there before he went to LSU. And funny story. I was in there one day, and I was lifting with someone, and I saw a guy I know, Brian Beeman. He was working with Will Levis, which I didn't know who that was at the time, but because I never saw him in person. But we were talking, and he said, "Yeah, I'm going to Kentucky. I'm transferring to Kentucky." And I said, "Oh, I thought he was a linebacker." I said, "Oh, like good company." Right? He's huge. Yeah, I said, "Big company down there. Good company down there." And then I realized who he was, and I just thought, man, I cannot believe how big this guy is. He's a quarterback. He's a really nice guy, and he made me look like he's probably twice as big as me, just height and everything. I couldn't believe how big he was as a quarterback, and now to see him in the NFL and everything, pretty interesting. But that's the type of stuff you see at your gym. You see guys that are, like you said, they're transferring. They're going to a different school. Now, sometimes I see guys in there, and I'm like, I know they're an athlete. I don't know who they are, but I know that they're some sort of elite athlete. Rob, you have your Wall of Fame, and I see, the Stupars on there. You got professionals at pretty much every level. You've worked with Tyler Smith. You worked with volleyball. You worked
Crispin, one of your
Crispin, yes.
Podcasts, yeah.
Crispin, you got both of his jerseys up there on the wall. What does it take to get on that wall? I've always wondered, what does it take to get on that Wall of Fame? I know I never will be, because I never played college or anything like that, but it's very interesting that you have jerseys up there like that.
I'm glad you asked. And I don't want to make this sound like I'm any better than anybody else, but we live by a standard around here, and if I spot, let me tell you a quick story. A friend of mine from Pittsburgh knew this guy who used to spot Greg Lloyd, old linebacker for the Steelers. This is, way back in the 90s. used to spot him at the gym. And when this guy started a training business, he listed Greg Lloyd as a client on his website. Like, we just don't roll that way. First of all, we're putting athletes on the wall, recognizing the effort that they put in while they were here, and acknowledging the blessing that we have in terms of being able to be part of their athletic life. But the integrity issue is every athlete on that wall has to have realized an improvement in their performance because of our training. So somehow our training has had to impact the way they perform and usually move them to another level. So if you walk into Victory, a parent walks into Victory with their kid for the first time and looks at that wall, I don't want there to be any question as to the validity of the people on that wall. Like, every one of those people have spent large amounts of time in this gym, moving a lot of iron, running a lot of sprints, jumping on a lot of boxes.
Yeah, Matt Adams is another one.
Yeah.
I always spend July 4th in Phillipsburg. So we were at, July 4th, we were at the Phillipsburg Elks. They have his jersey in there along with Kondo and everything, played for the Raiders. So it's cool to see Matt Adams. It's his World Series jersey too that you have in there.
It is. Yeah, it was great to have Matt here. Matt was like a little brother to me when he was here, and just all in. I think that's a big message for people that would be listening, that you're trying to move your kid along. I have some really strong beliefs in terms of the development of young athletes. And I think as a society, we're making a lot of mistakes, but, it really starts with being consistent and keeping your eye on the prize. And for Matt walked in the door here. He was an accomplished minor league player before I ever put my hands on him, but Matt walked in the door at 6'3", 285 pounds. And the first step was we had to get him lean. So the first off season, he dropped like 40 pounds. And once Matt really understood the science, and this is something I think is really important when you're a coach, when you're a trainer, you have to have enough knowledge so that you can confidently convey to your athletes and your clients why they're doing stuff. Because I really believe that when an athlete understands that there's a purpose in this exercise, or there's a purpose in the manner in which we do an exercise, they're going to be more excited, and the buy-in is going to be better. They're going to work harder because they know there's a method to the madness.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a lot. That's a big task to get him leaner like that. Because I do remember him. He was a naturally big guy. But that's the thing about a lot of these athletes. Some of them look bigger than they actually are. They look like they weigh more than they actually do, and some of them look like they weigh less, or vice versa. So most people probably saw him at that time and said, "Man, like that's perfect," But he had to lean down. And that's I've heard you talk about a few different athletes that needed to either get leaner, or gain weight. So that's like you've spoken about it. Every athlete is different in which the way you approach them. Now I know you've worked with Nate Stupar when he was there. You worked with his brother, and then did you work with Courtney Brown too?
No, Courtney was just a friend. I was an assistant strength coach at Penn State in the late 90s, and Courtney was a sophomore at the time. And this could be half a podcast in and of itself, but there were a group of guys that I got to be friends with. In fact, Courtney's roommate of 3 years, Tim Argiriotti, did his pro prep with me, then played professionally at multiple levels. He played NFL Europe. He played in Canada. I end up being in Tim's wedding. Tim is going to be in town tomorrow. So, and I think that's kind of a takeaway message for some of the coaches that might be listening to this. One of the benefits of doing what we do are the relationships that you develop, lifelong. I was just coaching two of my newest coaches on this 2 days ago. I'm like, listen, our job now, when athletes first come in, is we are a coach. We're not a friend. But what happens is over time, especially when your athletes, as we now say, retire, that relationship changes, and you now have friends for life.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely one of the most rewarding parts of it. I remember you telling me, well, you were on the sideline for a lot of people remember when Penn State played Arizona in '99 and they beat them up. It was the opening game. I think you were there in '99. How long were you there, Rob, on the
No,
sideline of Penn
I was
State?
there in '97 and '98.
Okay. Okay. This is a Justin Kirpakis story you were telling me about. So it must not have been '99, but I remember we were talking about that game. But you said that Kirpakis particularly, he was like shaking and he was going out onto what was it, kickoff or something like that.
Yeah, Penn State had, in my opinion, to this day, as good a kick coverage team as you're ever going to see. I mean, you had Justin Kirpakis, who has a couple Super Bowl rings. You had LeVar Arrington. You had a guy named Aaron Gatton. You had a linebacker from Harrisburg named Ahmad Collins, who would have started literally at probably, I my best guess would be 80 to 90% of the Division I schools out there, but he was at Penn State, and we were just so loaded with linebacker at that point. And literally every kickoff that year, every kickoff, if the kick didn't go out of the end zone, there were people from the other team on the ground. And this was our first game at home, and I forget who tasked me to do this, but it was my responsibility to get kickoff together and kind of make sure they were hyped up. And I'm working down the line, and Kirpakis was like the third guy. And what's funny about this story is, for any of your listeners who know Justin Kirpakis, he's like really intelligent, really well spoken. You meet him on the street, he's relatively mild mannered, and then bam, it's game day. And Justin's standing there shaking with literally with tears coming down his face. I'm like, yeah, this guy doesn't need any hype. He's good. I'll move to the next guy. So, and that's part of what I think people don't understand. You sometimes, as a father, you're trying to guide your kid. You think, well, I was a pretty good high school athlete, baseball, basketball, football, wrestling, whatever. So these guys that are playing at the level that my son's aspiring to, or my daughter's aspiring to, like, they're just a little better than I was. These your typical Penn State scholarship player, your typical Notre Dame scholarship player, your typical Penn State wrestler, these guys are not just a little better than you were. They are on another level.
Yes. Yes. And I always tell people this when I did my walk-on tryout at Penn State my freshman year, and I went to a small high school. I just wanted to try and make the team. That's all. I always wanted to do it. I didn't make the team, but I wanted to try. And after that, the scandal happened, so your chances actually went way up for guys like me who just wanted to make the team. But I always say this. I saw D1 talent at that time in person for the first time, and it's unbelievable. You can't put into words just how good they are, and how, you think just because you start like both ways in high school, like, oh yeah, I'm going to try and play at Penn State or something. No, no, these guys are completely different. They're on a totally different level. We've talked about it on my podcast multiple times. These guys at Penn State's bringing in right now that are committing to Penn State, these guys are totally different in terms of athleticism. So, and you see that all the time. So you know exactly what D1 looks like, Rob. So
yeah, and with the women, one of my best friends from college was a woman named Juliette McGee, who's now in Bucknell's Basketball Hall of Fame. I mean, she was 5'11", like 170 pounds. And like you said before, some athletes just don't look it. She actually used to do some modeling in the off season. And she did, like, if you'd have told other women that she weighed 170, they would have never believed you. But, she was she was an athlete, she could run, she could jump. she was not just a little better than your typical high school female basketball player. And it doesn't mean that like you weren't a good high school player. I'm sure you were. But man, these guys, again, especially the ones that are starters and guys that are playing the NFL, I could tell your listeners story after story that stories are kind of hard to believe. I mean, we had a Notre Dame offensive tackle, Mike Turkovich, trained with us 2 years, and he played in the league for a while. I mean, he was a 475 bencher. He could jump onto a 30-inch box at 318 pounds with one leg. These are not, you just don't see these people walking down the street every day.
No, no. Yeah, some of the stories that you told me, Rob, are crazy. Well, and again, I'm you and I have talked quite a bit in the gym, and we've talked about guys that like Courtney Brown. I mentioned him earlier, but you said at this wedding that he was at, this was like years after he was out of the NFL.
Yeah,
you could see the vein through his suit and his arm.
Yeah, so a lot of your listeners will probably relate to this. Imagine this: the dude came to the wedding with a size 60 jacket and 35 pants. 6'5", 295 pounds. He was 37 years old at the time. Just different human beings. And Cordy is an amazing guy. Great father, great husband. Unfortunately, got labeled as a bust with the NFL. But what most people don't know is even the story. There was a story ESPN did, and he was part of, and it just wasn't fair because they didn't talk about all the adversity that he went through. Courtney had something like 15 or 16 surgeries after he got into the NFL. Pretty tough to be great when you're in the operating room every season.
Rob, that's something I wanted to get into with you because we've talked about this too, and I think I don't know how much time you have, but I could talk to you all day, honestly, on this podcast. But you talk about science and your philosophy and knowing the science like Matt Adams did. And you don't have to talk about this if you don't want to, but we've talked about the previous lifting program at Penn State under Joe Paterno's regime. And a lot of these guys like Courtney Brown, like Jonna Carter, Blair Thomas, Curtis Eaton. Now, Blair Thomas, I think, might have been before they started with JT there at Penn State, but a lot of these guys went on to the NFL and they had injuries. And we've talked about the program that they had. It was lifting till failure and machine work. And I mean, do you think that contributed to these guys not working out in the NFL? I mean, because Penn State had so much talent. It was unbelievable. First two picks in the 2000 draft were Penn State linebackers, so.
Well, I think I would start with saying, listen, the guys involved were really good human beings. And I'm talking about the coaches. As far as the athletes and their injuries at the next level, it's really speculation. When you don't see the injury occur, when you don't know what the athlete is doing in terms of their off-field habits, how are they eating? How are they sleeping? Were they using illicit drugs or drinking too much or any of that stuff, which I'm not saying I have any reason to believe any of those guys did, but without having a full profile of what was going on with them, it's really hard to speculate. I just want to say, I think the science supports a free weight, body weight approach to developing athletics. And I think I'd kind of prefer to leave it there, but you can't deny the changes in some of those guys once they started training differently.
Yes. Yeah.
A lot of these guys got a lot bigger, a lot stronger, a lot faster.
Yeah, and I like your answer. you know, like you said, once they change the training, and I'm not talking about anyone in particular, but just in general, if you change the training, like you just said, then yes, you see a difference. And I'm sure it happened with a lot of those guys. But just for example, when Bill O'Brien came in, he completely gutted that weight room, and they had all free weights. They were in the squat racks. It was a multi-use squat rack. They still have them. I think pretty much every program has them at this point, but Penn State had a very unique lifting program. So as soon as Bill O'Brien came in, they changed that up completely. And Fitzgerald was there. And they went from that program to this program. And the players seemed to love it. Because I was there at the time, and the players seemed to love it. They got good results and everything. So because a lot of them hadn't done the free weight work like they were transitioning into with Bill O'Brien. So I 100% agree that that's the way to go. Rob, is there anything else that you wanted to dive into? I mean, like I said, we could be here all day, but we've talked about the science, your approach, and the guys you've worked with. Is there anything else that you want to say to the audience, whoever's listening?
I think if there's one thing I would say is just that we touched on the approach of training young athletes and moving everyone who has a son or daughter that loves sport and is aspiring to be at the collegiate level. They want to give them the greatest opportunity possible. And I understand that. But I had an opportunity to speak to a group of parents last week. And I asked them a simple question. And the question was, are the masses getting scholarships? And almost every head in the room is doing this. Nope, they aren't. So my follow-up question is, then why are you following the masses? So for anyone who's listening to this right now, like, listen, sometimes the truth hurts, but I'm a coach. So my job is to share the truth and challenge people to think. The question becomes, is playing 12 months a year of soccer or basketball or baseball or softball, is that really the best way to go? The best people in the world, the best strength coaches, the best performance coaches, the best physical therapists, doctors, neurobiologists, everybody says, no, it's not. A lot of people don't know this. A couple years ago, well, actually, it's more than a couple. It's probably 10 or 12 years ago. USA Soccer put out a statement on their website pleading with parents to take 2 4-week blocks a year completely off of soccer and train, lift, do speed work, or just recover if need be. And I'm hoping that some parents listen to this and take it to heart. More is not better. Better is better. It's not about how many hours you shoot a basketball. It's not about how many kicks you do of a soccer ball. It's how well you do the ones that you do. And when you look at most high school athletes, most of them are nutritionally compromised in some way. Either they're not getting enough essential fats in or not getting enough protein in. And for most of the girls that are playing year-round high school sports, they are nutritionally and real generally speaking, calorically deprived, or insufficient levels of macros all the time. So the more you do, the more she does, the more he does, the less able they are to recover from the things they really need to recover from. So my hope is that this challenges some parents to think about, my daughter plays soccer. 52% of ACL tears amongst women happen in soccer. Has your daughter been screened, and is she doing ACL prevention? If she's not, you got to ask yourself why, because every doctor on the planet is pleading with parents to do that. So I'm going to plead with them too. Please open up your paradigm and realize that if your daughter isn't fast enough, the next 1,000 hours of soccer isn't going to be the key to her getting faster. It's going to be an integrated approach where She's improving, in a lot of cases, ankle mobility. She's improving core strength the right way, and she's developing the lower body strength she needs to move her body across the pitch. It's not about more hours of the sport.
Yeah, and females, they have I believe the term is the higher Q angle,
Yeah,
and their hips
absolutely.
go in, so their ACLs are kind of already at a disadvantage when it comes to potentially being torn or injured. So yeah, 100%, Rob. Rob, there, one thing that I've noticed with a lot of athletes, especially in this area, Central PA, is the in-season program. There's a lack of an in-season program at a lot of schools. Not every school, but there's a lack of an in-season program. What do you think is the best approach to that? An in-season program, because you know how important that is. Like lifting is what I mean. Lifting is what I'm talking about.
So Mark, when you say best approach, are you talking about like if I'm my best approach if I'm a sport coach, or my best approach if I'm a parent, or do
I
you
would
have a
say as a
specific
coach,
thought in mind?
like a head coach of a football team, what's the best approach
All right.
to an in-season lifting program?
So the way I would do it, if I were probably any sport, but if I'm a sport coach, first of all, you have to prioritize it. So it's that old saying, if you don't schedule it, it's probably not going to get done. So here's one of the things I hear so often, and it's just it's an indication of really poor planning on a coach's part. We get done 15 minutes early. All right, guys, let's go in the weight room and lift. No plan, no purpose. Let's just go in and do whatever.
Yeah.
Every team in season, I think, should do 2 sessions a week. One probably being a little bit higher volume. So to make it really simple, if some extra sets, and the second session just being a faster approach to stimulating the nervous system. And one of the things that's a huge weapon in a coach's arsenal, and a lot of coaches just aren't aware of it, or they don't incorporate it, is your warm-up, or what we now term as activation. If your warm-up is specific to what you need, you can use your warm-up as a training tool. So if I'm a basketball coach for a girls basketball team at the high school level, we can do 3 or 4 specific drills within the activation period of the warm-up period every day that's going to reduce those girls' chances of tearing an ACL. Or I can do it the way I've always done it. And that is a big pet peeve of mine. So much of what coaches do is dictated by tradition. I do it this way because my coach did it with me 20 years ago. Well, there's been a lot of science that has happened in that 20-year period, or the last 30-year period. And there's better ways to do things. And there are people out there that can help you through that process. It doesn't take a lot of money, and it doesn't take a lot of effort for a high school coach to get some really valuable information.
Yeah. Why do you think programs just say, hey, 15 minutes for early for practice, we're just going to go in and throw you in the weight room. You guys are going to go in and probably spend half the time texting your girlfriend. Why do you think most programs do that? I mean, is it, I guess, lack of knowledge, or is it they just don't think it's that important? I mean, to me, it's like it's an epidemic. Like Texas high school football, that's 365. You know what I mean? You would never ever hear of a program not lifting in season. So why do you think it is that they don't take it seriously as they should?
I
guess
think
you
it's
kind of already answered it, but
well, it's in part it's not getting informed. I'll tell you a quick story. This is like multiple coaches ago. One of the local high schools, they had a new head coach, young guy, and I used to be the president of the Central PA chapter of the National Football Foundation and College Hall of Fame, and we held this mixer, and we invited all the local coaches, and this guy was there. He had just gotten the job, and he comes up to me, he goes, "Are you Rob Oshinskie?" I said, "Yeah." I said, how do you know?" He said, "Well," he said, "honestly, after I've gotten the job, the first 5 people I talked to said the first person I need to talk to is you." And I said, "Well, why?" He said, "Well, these people all said if I'm going to develop young athletes, like, I should pick your brain. So is that possible?" So we got together a couple times for coffee and we talked, and he genuinely wanted to know. He had great questions. And we talked about the science. We talked about why certain things that fall under that tradition umbrella just aren't the best way to do things. And he just said to me the second time we met, he's just like head in his hands, and he's like, "I just can't believe how much I don't know. I can't believe how far behind the times I am." And I just posted this on social media a week or two ago. I haven't prescribed a sit-up in 25 years. So if sit-ups are still part of your core routine, understand that at the elite levels, and I am far from the only one. There's friends of mine like Lee Taft and other guys I know that are great performance coaches. They would tell you the same thing. They haven't prescribed a sit-up in 25 years. They don't train abs because there's way over 30 muscles that comprise the core. It's not just your rectus abdominis. So I think it comes down to priorities. It's like you. Like, I know how serious you take your fitness. Well, that process includes decisions like, I'm going to rehydrate first thing in the morning. I'm going to get X number of grams of protein every day. I've got to get X amount of complex carbs every day. They're decisions. So as a sport coach, if you don't decide that strength training is going to be an integral part of your in-season program, it's not going to be.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and that's another thing that we get into is hydration and the total lack of that, just in general, lack of nutrition. I remember some of the pregame meals we had for football, and I'm like, looking back on it now, I'm like, man, I can't believe we ate that before a game. That gave us like no advantage whatsoever. But I took your bodybuilding class, Rob, and I still have the notes from it, and I look at them pretty much every day. The hydration. I take 4,000 milligrams of vitamin C every day because of the class I took with you. The honey for pre-workout, the healthy fats. I got healthy fats after, because you and I were talking about some of the athletes you worked with, and their main thing that they were missing was healthy fats. So I started getting that. Macadamia nut oil. There was a lot from that class that I learned from you, that I still implement now. So there's a lot of it. There's a lot of factors, like you said, the lack of knowledge, I think, for a lot of them. And yeah, I'd have to, yeah, that must be what it is the lack of knowledge, the lack of knowing how important it is to have a lifting program in general, let alone in season and stuff like that. Rob, I wanted to ask you one last question. It's kind of a funny question, but if there's nothing else that you want to cover, we can jump into my last question here. I know you're a busy guy, so I don't want to hold you too long. And hopefully I'll have you on again. I would like to have you on again. We could talk more about this stuff. I mean, it could be a series as far as I'm concerned on here. But Rob, who is the most famous person you've worked with? Athlete wise, who's the most famous athlete you've worked with?
That would be a tie. Jamie Bestwick, 14-time X Games champion, and Chris Edwards. Chris is, I think, a 5 or 6-time X Games champion and was a top three placer. I don't know how many times. Both guys are arguably Chris is arguably the best inline skater of all time, and Jamie is arguably the best vert ramp rider of all time. So those guys probably by far.
And they were at Woodward, I'm assuming.
Yeah. Woodward
Okay.
was a big part of my early career. It was just a blessing to be part of that community. Thanks to Gary Ream and Ed Isabel. They and this is, there's a lesson in this when you talk about parents and developing kids. Gary and Ed came to me with an open mind. I was actually training some of Gary's kids at the time. They were really good high school athletes. And they came to me and they said, listen, these guys get hurt all the time. And by the nature of the sport, most of the guys that ride bikes and skateboards and inline skate, like, they're kind of counterculture. They don't want to do things the way other athletes do. And I thought that was actually really cool as I got to know these guys. But when Ed and Gary came to me, they were like, listen, these guys don't want to do the traditional. They don't want to do bench, squat, deadlift. And we know you train athletes in a different manner, and we think there's going to be a great fit. So, they spent the money, they put in a good weight room at Woodward, and I was there 4 or 5 days a week every summer. And these guys bought in, and it was a great experience.
That's cool. Yeah. I forget about Woodward because it is out in the Penns Valley area as far as I remember. And it's way out there. I mean, the camp is pretty far from even State College, really. But that's one of the biggest camps in the country.
Yeah, when we were training there, it was the world mecca for exports.
Wow.
From Tony Hawk to Travis Pastrana to Dave Mira, the icons of the first big generation, so to speak, of X Games champions, everybody was there. It was a really cool vibe. And you'd have big sponsors like Adidas and ESPN and other entities that were in camp all the time, because it was at the infancy stages where those sports were just absolutely exploding. And what a lot of people don't realize is how amazing these athletes are. Jamie said to me, listen, you got to come and watch a session. You got to see me ride. And when I showed up, that vert ramp is 14 feet high, and Jamie's literally 18 feet above the lip of the ramp, above the coping. There's an immediate awareness to these guys are amazing athletes. Don't downplay their athleticism because they wear baggy shorts or because they don't play with a ball. Like, these guys are amazing.
Yeah. Rob, and that I think there's some sports that don't get the respect that they deserve because it doesn't involve a ball or it's not on TV. Or I just talked about gymnastics the other day. I used to live with the gymnast at Penn State. That's one of the hardest sports, in my opinion, that there is. The dedication it takes, the life that they live. They are totally immersed in that sport. I used to know some swimmers too, and they say, "Oh, those football workouts are so easy compared to ours," So they always have that spat back and forth. But Rob, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. It was great.
Yeah, it was great to talk to you. Definitely want to have you on again, and you and I can talk about topics and subjects, whatever you would want to talk about. But more than anything, I just want to get your story. You have a great gym. I really enjoy your gym. It's one of the best. I've been to gyms all over the country. Your gym is one of the best that I've been to. So thank you for providing that.
That means a lot.
Yeah, Rob, and I've been all over the country, and your gym is one of the best. And thank you for providing that to the local community and not just saying like, hey, we're just gonna have athletes in here. Thank you for letting me bodybuilder in, you know, guys like that. So is there anything you want to plug before you jump off?
Oh boy, I don't know.
I know
Sometimes
you're busy, Rob.
I'm not the best self promoter.
I don't know how many more
Um,
athletes you can take on right now, but
well, we just expand our staff, so we could take
all
on a
right,
few.
cool.
I would just encourage people to question tradition. Go out and talk to people. And for those who are working directly with athletes, or if they're athletes themselves, realize that the long-term key to success is being consistent. It's not about working your tail off for 2 or 3 weeks and then taking a break. It's about grinding all the time and keeping your eyes on the goal. And really that includes the adult athlete. One of the biggest, well, a future direction for Victory is really longevity training, because there are more and more men and women over the age of 40 that want to live an exceptional level of fitness. And there are specific ways to get there. And it starts with being empowered with the right information, because there's a lot of really poor information out there. So if I could leave your audience with this: don't rely on TikTok and stuff like that for your information. There is some good stuff out there. There's some amazing stuff on YouTube if you know who to follow, but there's a lot of really poor information. And one of my biggest soapboxes is just abdominal training or core training. You don't get an amazing six-pack by doing hundreds of crunches and sit-ups. I ask people all the time, listen, if I have big fat arms, would you tell me to go to the gym and do a couple hundred curls every day to make my arms smaller? And everybody says, no way. I said, and I'll say, well, then why are you doing that for your core? It's the same thing. Fat's a systemic energy source. So, get informed with great information, follow the right people, and your fitness and your athlete's performance will reap the benefit.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you pretty much said it, Rob. It comes down to just the dedication of just being consistent and the discipline to get it done. And that's very important. But yeah, if you guys listening, you want to learn, you want some knowledge, Rob's a great source, and Rob's always very open to speaking. As busy as you are, Rob, anytime we've talked, I've gotten a lot of good information from you. So I would say check out your website, Rob, the Victory Sports website. You guys have a lot of
victorynation.com.
Yeah.
And if there's anyone listening who actually manages or leads teams of trainers or coaches, I have a second business called the Winner Circle. Eric Mitchell, who would be a great guest on your podcast. Eric and I are really close friends with a very parallel professional path in terms of what has got us to where we are. And we come on site and work with teams. We've worked with T3 Sports, which is arguably the #1 sports performance program in the country and out in suburban Cleveland. We've worked with a number of other big health clubs, so we can help.
Yeah, Rob, we'll talk more for sure via text or in person about if there's anybody else that would want to come on here and talk. Absolutely, especially with you. But Rob, again, thanks for coming on. You guys have seminars. I went to the bodybuilding seminar. I believe you've had several seminars, people speaking. They can find it on your website, right? If they want to come and listen to that.
Yeah, we have nothing planned at the moment. Social media is probably a little better way to go. So we're on Facebook and Instagram. But yeah, they can always call in and ask, and we're able to come on site. So myself and a couple of our other coaches are able to come on site, do school in services, or in fact, I spoke a couple times this past year at your alma mater. Came into Bald Eagle area and spoke to the students there a couple times.
Cool. Awesome. All right, Rob. Well, until next time, you guys listening, like, share, subscribe. If you have any questions for Rob, let me know and I'll ask him. But Rob, definitely we'll plan it. We'll plan another interview with you soon. So
Awesome. Appreciate it, Mark.
yep. All right. Thanks, Rob.
Have a great weekend.
You too. All right, Rob. Thank you.
Yeah,
That was
you're
great.
welcome. That was great.
Is there anything you think I missed or?
No, I mean, I think you did a great job of corralling the story, because my story is so multifaceted. I mean, you could go into the spiritual side of things.
Yes. Okay.
There's been, this might be appropriate in the future. We've dealt with a lot of adversity, and I think most athletes, and sometimes as adults, you're gonna face adversity along the way. We've had to persevere through a lot since Victory opened its doors.
Yeah.
And there's there's the COVID side of that.
Yes.
There's a number of different ways we could go. I mean, some people are, depending on what I don't know what your viewership is in terms of the age demographic, but for people over 40, I'm one of those over 40 warriors. There's a lot of people that are looking to be their best at those older ages, and they don't have the information, or sometimes even an example to follow.
Yes.
So I thought you did a good job of, corralling things, because we really could have, the story could really get involved. Like, we start talking about some of the things my dad had done to influence me very positively.
Yeah.
Some of the ways my coaches didn't influence me, things they could have done better. Mentors and different things. If we're going to do another episode or two, we can always do a deeper dive.
Yeah. I just wrote down what you said. We'll communicate here. And then, I definitely want to have you on again. And if there's anyone else that you think would want to come on and talk, again, like I said, I want to get your story, Rob. You have a very interesting story, and we can definitely dive deeper into that and the gym and everything. But, I want to give people a platform. I want people to come on and tell their story. And I'm sure you've done other podcasts and everything, but I wanted to have guys like you, because I want people on my channel to know you and your story and what you're doing. And because at the end of the day, it's just interesting. Like Joe Crispin, I wanted him to talk about his story, because I haven't seen him on a lot of podcasts. Tyler Smith, I want him to come on and talk about a story. So you guys are all similar in the sense that I just want to get your story out there. I want to hear it. You know what I mean? So, and then other people can listen to it too. So.
Yeah, I had a really interesting interaction with a guy who's a local business owner that I know pretty well, because I've actually spoken to his team on a couple occasions, and we ran into each other at he just happened to be visiting my church a couple weeks ago, and we talked afterwards, and he said to me, he goes, I don't know all the details, but I just want you to know that I'm aware that you and Jackie have been through a lot, and the fact that you guys have persevered and are still in business, I want you to know it's an inspiration to me. So,
wow.
Yeah, if I can help somebody to, push through, because they may be going through a number of things. We lost a nephew, 21 years old, in a motorcycle accident. Parents with cancer. On and on. There's been a lot of stuff.
Wow. Yeah, Rob, we can definitely dive into that stuff. That's very, I've heard stories of, some of the adversity you guys have faced, but if you wanted to dive more into that, and that's just an inspiration for business owners in general. So yeah, definitely. Rob, what's the best way to contact you, Rob? Do you think texting is the best way to contact you?
Yeah, and Mark, if ever I don't get back I almost never am able to get back immediately, but if it's like, a few hours or a day, do not think twice about shooting another text, because sometimes,
Okay.
I wake up in the morning and there's 12 texts waiting for me, and just sometimes, things slip through the cracks. It's not intentional.
Yeah, no problem. No problem, Rob. Sounds good. I'll do that then.
All right, Mark. Well, thanks for thinking about me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for your time. I'll probably see you later today if you're in the gym. I don't know if you'll be there, but I'll probably
I'm not sure how much longer I'm gonna be here. I might not. I'm thinking about getting out of here, but
yeah.
I gotta go talk to the boss.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I might see her then too.
All right, buddy.
All right. See you, Rob.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
Yep.
You are listening to the Mark Lesko Podcast, a podcast by diehard fans for fans. It's as honest and as raw as sports talk can be. Thank you for listening to the Mark Lesko Podcast.